I'm vengeance.
Matt Reeves' The Batman in 2022, starring Robert Pattinson. A very controversial cast initially, but I think he really nailed the role, both of playing the Batman and Bruce Wayne. But why is this movie so long? Well, I'm gonna answer that question and give you my full review of the movie, and you've been warned, while there's not a ton, there are probably a few spoilers. What's up, guys? I'm Jordan Needham. This is J-Ham Entertainment. For those of you that typically watch this channel, you're not used to seeing film reviews or anything of that sort on this channel. But film has been a part of my life for many years, a big part of my life. It really inspires me every single day. And my career as a CGI artist is technically within the film industry. And so film isn't just something that randomly, like I sporadically decided I have a passion for. I've also enrolled in 2 film schools. That's a whole different story. I broke my leg, couldn't go to one of them. I went to one online. I didn't feel like it was really worth it. But the point is, I've loved films for a long time, and not just films, but also I've been a bit of a comic book nerd ever since my childhood. So this isn't just like, oh, some random dude sporadically decided to make a Batman review. No, but it is a CGI artist that sporadically decided to make a Batman review. So did the Batman really have to be 3 hours long? I mean, I don't know the official runtime. I could look it up, of course, but it was like 2 hours, 52 minutes or something like that. So basically 3 hours, right? I stand by this runtime, and while I do think there's a few times that the film gets a little bit slow and probably could have sped up a bit, I think ultimately this runtime served its purpose really well. It wasn't like a movie where you felt like, God, like this needs to end. Like there's like the last 30 minutes, you know, there's some films where it's just like, bro, we know exactly what's gonna happen. You gotta fight the bad guy, you gotta go through the third act, just get it over with. That was not this, or this was not that. And I think in particular, this is something I haven't heard a lot of people talk about when I've watched some Batman reviews on the internet. Since the villain is the Riddler, I think the runtime should be a little bit long. If you're gonna have the Batman's main villain in a film be the Riddler, I do think it benefits the film to have sort of a long runtime, because the cat and mouse game has to feel like it's actually confusing, or it's like actually difficult to solve. As Batman is playing detective, he shouldn't know all the answers right away, and he certainly doesn't. And there's dead ends, and there's moments in the film where it's like nobody knows what's really happening. Like the Riddler is in some ways just winning, and every time they do solve a riddle, it's like it's too late anyways. And so it's that cat and mouse sort of game. It's Batman playing detective that over time, over the course of the film, it does build on itself, and it builds a lot of tension. And so I think, you know, had the film been 30 minutes shorter or something, a lot of that probably would have been lost. I think the believability of Batman struggling to solve the Riddler's riddles would have been dampened by a shorter runtime. You could argue just, well, they couldn't just cut other scenes that had nothing to do with that, and possibly, but I think considering this film was so long, it did a great job of staying on topic, staying on the plot, and entertaining you the entire time. In other words, it didn't feel like Venom, a movie that just has a lot of scenes that leave you feeling like, okay, that was funny, but what was the point of that? But what are the downsides of the long runtime? I think this is a more nuanced conversation, because there's always going to be that segment of the audience that will watch a Batman film no matter how long it is, because they're Batman fans, they're comic book fans, they're Batman fans, and they want to see more Batman, so they will stick around for it. But I also acknowledge that the average person who's not really a huge Batman fan and just wants to see a really entertaining film with their family or something, 3 hours is probably pushing it for them. And that's, yeah, I totally understand. And I actually saw a few people leave right after the intermission in the screening of the Batman. Now, a lot of them were just like younger kids, so I think they probably didn't understand what was going on, because I feel like this is a film where the plot does have some nuance that a kid might not understand, you know? And so they probably just thought like, wow, this is boring. Because when I was a kid, I loved like the Spider-Man movies, for instance. I loved them, but mainly because like he's fighting the Green Goblin, and that was dope. But I didn't understand really all the plot and the story building and everything that was going on. So I could see how this film would be boring for them. Not to focus on kids, but what I am saying is like, if you're not a huge fan of Batman, 3 hours is probably pushing it. But in an age where Marvel really brought to light a lot of characters that were otherwise going to go unnoticed, and no one would have really cared besides comic book fans if they never got their time on screen because they didn't know they existed. A lot of people, for instance, had no idea who Black Panther was. Now, he's always been relatively popular, but I remember as a kid when I was growing up and I was obsessed with Marvel Comics, Black Panther was this like deeply underrated, deeply overlooked Marvel character that was never going to get his time on the big screen, like never. But then, you know, many years later, probably a decade later, Disney buys out Marvel, all of this and all that, but then we have a Black Panther film which really took the world by storm, and now everybody, literally everybody in America, literally everybody in the free world knows who Black Panther is. So my point of that is Marvel has proven you can please the fans, the comic book nerds, the comic fans, and then also make a really, really great film that holds up to critics and people love. And I think the Batman does that. I think there are times where it's definitely like, well, that's something only a fan is gonna really appreciate. But after all, like, this is a Batman film. This isn't made to be just a blockbuster that makes a lot of money. It's supposed to serve its purpose as a Batman film. My last note on the runtime is that while this film gets a lot of criticism for being so long, I think it's odd that there are films that are 10 or 12 minutes shorter than this that never got complained about for being too long, like the Avengers films, for instance. You know, this is an age where there are long films out there. Most Marvel movies these days are pushing 2 hours and 30 minutes, and so it's not that far-fetched to see a movie that's about 3 hours. And I think part of what makes this film so special and so unique is that Matt Reeves gave it time to breathe. It feels like you're becoming really close to the Batman. It feels like he's almost part of your life. And this isn't just like a cut, moving really fast movie where it feels like they just want to take your money, show you some cool scenes, and then kick you out. You know, this is like a character study. The only part of the runtime that I think maybe could have been cut down were these few scenes at the end of the movie where it did feel like they were wrapping a lot up and maybe too much that just didn't really have to happen. There was this long voiceover sequence at the end by Batman, and it's probably 3 minutes long or so. I think it added a lot of context to the film. I think it definitely builds on the plot, and it definitely did its purpose telling the story. So I don't want to complain too much about it. I think I enjoyed it personally. I would say the last 5 or 10 minutes of the film were very slow, but that's to be expected a lot of times these days. Like in Spider-Man No Way Home, it's kind of wrapping everything up, it's becoming way more grounded, and you're getting a taste of like, what is this character gonna feel like in the next film? And so that's to be expected. But there's also one last thing which I did not really think was necessary, and I am of the opinion that it was a bit forced. The Joker is in this movie at the very end, and I don't know. I've watched a few reviews that have critiqued this part of the movie. I don't have a problem with the Joker being in this universe, but it just does feel like, you know, especially when we've had like 6 different Batmans and now we're gonna have like even more Jokers just in recent days. Like, I just hope they handle this Joker well, and I also don't want them to make the next film be like about the Joker or have him star as Batman's main villain, because we've seen the Joker a ton at this point, and I think there's other Batman villains, although I'm not a huge Batman nerd, there's other Batman villains and stories that could be developed without the Joker being the guy, the main guy. He could have a role like the Penguin had in this movie, but he doesn't have to be the main villain. Yeah, I don't have a problem that he exists in the universe, but I do have some worries. But that Joker cameo definitely wasn't necessary, so it did feel a little bit forced. But that's like my only complaint in the entire movie. And since we're talking about my general opinions of the film at this point, I do want to focus on things that others haven't really said. And I think one of the things that made this film really, really solid and really, really good and hit hard, and you could really feel for Batman, like the entire film. It just felt like there were moments where the entire crowd was just, oh, and those action sequences were very, very grounded. That's one of the parts of the film that I hope doesn't get overlooked. And Christopher Nolan's series of The Dark Knight, it is a very grounded series. And while the Matt Reeves version of the Batman is less afraid to show its comic book roots, it still feels in a lot of ways just as grounded as Christopher Nolan's films because of how real the action sequences were. For instance, Batman got shot with shotguns in the film, knocked his head on bridges, and just got beat up several times. A bomb went off in front of his face. Things that are not supposed to happen to superheroes happen to Batman in this film. Moments where in Marvel or something, you would look at it and be like, oh, he's gonna like dodge the shotgun and then beat the crap out of a guy. No, he's gonna take the hit and really suffer from it. So there were a lot of moments like that, and of course there's some moments like that in Marvel. Daredevil, for instance, but that's a TV series that's very unique in the MCU. It deserves its own video. But there were a lot of moments like that that really grounded this take on the Batman that I really appreciated. Overall, I really enjoyed the Batman. Let me know what you guys think of this film in the comments below. I know a lot of people are like, why won't you compare it to the rest of the films? Like, how does this stack up to... I think this film is unique enough to just stand on its own. I don't want to have to compare it to the Dark Knight trilogy or anything of the past. I think it's a great take on the Batman. So I'm Jordan Needham. This has been J-Ham Entertainment, and I will catch you next time.